Hello, welcome to this interview. Today I'm speaking to Gabriela Houston, who's the author of The Second Bell, The Bone Roots, and also The Storm Child and The Wind Child, as well as the editor of Whispers in the Earth and the writer of Binding the Cuckoo, which I absolutely love.
Oh, I'm so glad.
You could say prolific. I would say very talented.
You could.
I would say prolific. So today we are discussing Binding the Cuckoo. And this is a departure from your usual type of writing. So you've written fantasy books built in Slavic worlds, Slavic places, usually with female protagonists. So we still have a female protagonist,
yes.
That has stayed. But this time it's a historical romance novel with light folklore elements. So tell me about that.
So in my previous books, I focused on love relationships within the family, within a community as well. Mm-hmm. So you could say community love stories.
Yes.
And this is quite a challenge for me. I decided to focus on the romance element. I've always been a historical romance reader. Okay. I felt like this was the right next move for me, and I still wanted to bring in the elements of folklore, which I love. I still wanted to have a pinch of magic, and of course the focus on women helping women, feminist undertones, all about good stuff. But I wanted it to be predominantly historical romance, with just a pinch of it, of the other stuff. So that's what this book is. Okay. So it still has all the elements that I'm kind of known for, but
I did notice that the magical systems are there. The cute little creatures are there. You've got the sidekicks. There's, of course, a cat.
Of course, I sneak in my cat in every book if I can.
And it's enjoyable. And it's been really fun looking at the book tour leading up to this release. I've seen some comparisons to The Outlander, to Bridgerton. How do you feel about those?
I think they're quite spot on. I think that the readers of Outlander and Bridgerton should enjoy this. So it's very much set in this time period, which is the end of the 19th century, so turn of the century, end of Queen Victoria's reign, and the rise of the Edwardians. So in America, they call it the Gilded Age, and I've always found it just so fascinating in every respect. I not just aesthetically, but from this sheer energy of that period. And it's just so known for the rise of women's rights movements, and also perhaps less spoken of, the rise of things to do with the rights of domestic workers, which was at that time the largest employer in the UK. And those people had virtually no rights guaranteed. So people started finding their conscience when it comes to that, and started thinking a bit about securing those people and giving them more rights and giving them greater security in life, especially later life. So all of that is something that I drew on when it comes to writing this book. And that all went into the research.
It comes through. It's quite moving, actually, seeing Edwina, the main character, who is a fae, but not fae, what's the word?
A mythic.
She's a mythic. Yeah. And when she notices other mythics in the household, she sees that all the other mythics are servants, but she's passing as human. And I think that concept of passing comes across with such strength, but it also helps you to see that she feels uncomfortable that she is seeing mythics who are subservient to the very people that she is supposed to be networking with and spending time with. And they're great people. She considers them friends, and yet she realises they don't even know the names of the mythics. They haven't thought to ask them names. They've lost those rights. And from your research, did you find that people actually just were not called by their names whilst working as servants?
Oh yes, absolutely. So in an Edwardian home, unlike what we might have seen on Downton Abbey, it would be quite common for the lady of the house, the master of the house, if they absolutely had to refer to the servants in any capacity, they would just call them Thomas or Molly.
That's wild.
because also like the turnover of a staff could be fairly significant, so you would not bother learning the names of the footman, the second footman.
Maybe if they learnt the names, the turnover wouldn't be so high.
I think the turnover wouldn't necessarily be the servant's choice.
So there you go. And it's really interesting seeing, I don't know, I hadn't been that interested in this period of time before I read this book. And then I felt quite emotional. It made me think, wow, this is the time that my grandfather, who I was quite close to, was born into. And you see so much shift. It made me think about his mother and the fact that she had so many children and the rights she would have or would not have had. It's a really, really fascinating time period. So I hear whispers that there may be other books in the series. You've done a lot of research. Do you think there's enough for you to kind of carry through? And what year do you think you'll go up to?
So at the moment, I want to stick to that sort of time frame, so turn of the century, the death of Queen Victoria, obviously, in 1901, a fairly significant event. But even before that, her son, King, Bertie, as he was known, or later King Edward, he really brought in a different atmosphere among the upper classes. So whilst Queen Victoria and her husband were known for being quite proper and everything was quite rigid, and Queen Victoria's husband as well was very much interested in technical projects. He was involved in the great overhaul of the plumbing system in London, things like that. He was interested in social welfare and questions like that. So some of that really filtered through. People say that royalty really sets the tone for the aristocrats, and then that filters through to the upper classes and eventually to the middle classes, and really in this society really influenced how people behaved in many ways. And so under Queen Victoria, we have this stereotype of gentleman botanist and gentleman scientist, gentleman inventor. But under the influence of King Edward VII, the things that he was mostly known for, let's face it, were the aesthetics, shall we say? So he was he was the absolute last word in fashion. Mm-hmm. So he and his wife were very fashionable. They liked grand parties. Everything had to be very grand, very very much for show. It was perfectly normal to have a luncheon with 20 dishes served one after the other. 20-course meal. So things changed in how the upper classes saw themselves and what they felt was the fashionable way to be. But quite aside from that, sort of moved towards what we could say is significantly less cerebral pursuits. The fashions of that period are very outward looking, I think. So when you look at the movements that influence the art of that period, they often look towards Asia, look towards Japan. All of that really influenced fashion. And in the book, because in Binding the Cuckoo, it's an alternative history book. So the scientists in this Victorian age made a breakthrough discovery that allowed them to pierce through the boundaries between our world and the worlds of folklore, different separate worlds of folklore, and they could bind to our world, summon and bind creatures of those worlds, seemingly at complete random. And I was thinking in the fashions of the period that would also be reflected, because you are bringing those completely alien creatures into our world, and their abilities and their memories often are very much diminished. They would bring something with them, a pinch of magic, a pinch of something different, maybe different ways of weaving fabrics, maybe maybe jewelry making skills, maybe something else in the artistic sphere, in music. And I wanted to imbue that into the book. The way I was thinking about Asian art influencing the Art Nouveau period.
Oh, I do love that. Yeah, it did come across very colonial. And it came across that instead of going over to Asia and Africa and, bringing people over, it was snatching people from their worlds and actually, giving them new names, erasing their memories. It felt very real, very visceral, and yet completely mythical.
I mean, I felt like this is exactly what people would do if they could.
I think you're right, sadly. It's what we've seen. So you mentioned aesthetics, and aesthetics and art come across not just in the book, but on the book, the cover, the illustrations. I love that you've self-illustrated this so beautifully. And it matches your headpiece. It's great. It's also interesting how Edwina, I don't want to give spoilers, but let's just say art is important to her. It's a theme throughout the novel. And for many people, they find, escape in art, they find escape in books. So thinking about this theme of escape and you writing this book, it brought to mind the fact that this is a departure for you in another way, not just in terms of genre, but you have been traditionally published through the publishing industry. And with this book, it's the first time you're self-publishing.
Yes.
So let's talk art, escape.
So it's an adventure for me, and it's a very exciting adventure for me. This is a delicate topic, but I wanted, of course, only the best people. So in going indie, I wanted to see just how much me having full control over the marketing and the book production would influence how well that book, or the audiences that it can reach. So also with this book, I was told by multiple industry people, agents and publishers and editors, that historical just doesn't sell. So at the moment, I'm told they're not acquiring anything historical. People don't want to read historical. They're bored of it. And I don't believe that. I mean, look at the biggest titles of some of the recent years. We mentioned Bridgerton and Outlander, of course. And I think that the audience is there. I think that people love historical novels. I certainly do. So I really wanted to, I thought this was the perfect project to take indie. Partially because of that, but partially because also I was quite keen to see about what I could do unrestrained by the traditional publishing machinery. I think, in traditional publishing, you're very much constrained in what you can do. You don't necessarily contact people directly. Publishing professionals don't necessarily share with you what they're doing, especially not in real time. You don't know who's being contacted, who isn't being contacted. You're not privy to all the conversations in the background. And of course, you can't invest in marketing as well because you're getting back such a tiny percentage. I mean, with indie publishing, with Amazon, putting up the rates, you're still not making a huge amount of money off it, but it's certainly a higher percentage than traditional publishing, meaning that if you decide to do some marketing, paid marketing, you actually stand a chance of recouping those costs. So this was a bit of an incentive, and I'm still technically under contract. I can't talk about it at the moment, but I am under contract for traditional publishing. So I thought this was the perfect project and be the perfect time for me to go hybrid.
Absolutely. And I love what you've done with that freedom, the fact that you've been able to create such a beautiful cover. It shocks me that anyone would read this and think the genre is going to bind the audience, because it's not a book that I would typically pick up, and yet I feel that this is one of the best books I've read this year. My favourite thing you've written so far. It's excellent. The characters are so real. The themes are fascinating, and the world feels immersive. I don't really like descriptive writing, and yet you describe things in such beautiful language. The prose just flows. It's literary. Do you know what I mean? I feel like it's a book that defies genre. And what we've seen time and time again is those kinds of books are exciting. You have this, a critical mass builds of readers who just love the writing, love the characters, love the world, and they make the book do well. So it will be interesting to see what happens with this. We've seen that actually publishing as an industry, maybe they're bound in the same way that in this book you see a lot of women whose choices you might question until you step back and think, well, how much freedom do they actually have? And it's really nice to see people have those epiphanies about different people in the book who seem to have a lot of freedom and a lot of scope. Maybe the same thing happens in publishing. Maybe a lot of the editors don't have the freedom to go against what the data says or what their seniors say.
For sure,
it's frustrating.
For sure. I think in having worked in publishing as well, I think that a lot of the decisions regarding what's being commissioned are not editorially driven at all. So the machine is what it is at the moment, and it's very much focused on debuts. There's a lot of trend chasing, so we'll see where it goes. It's a very turbulent time in the publishing industry at the moment. There's been quite a few articles published about it recently. So there's a lot happening, and I think it's always been operating on the blockbuster model. But I think now the proportions of what makes money for everything else have been unbalanced for quite a while. And that puts publishers in a position where they're chasing the new thing, the new debut. So I think that from what I've seen, there's a lot more indie authors than mid-list authors actually making a living.
That's fascinating.
And there's people you might have never heard of, and whose name you will never hear of in the mainstream. You won't see their books in W.H. Smith's, at least for now. But those people make a very good living. So we will see where it takes us. I just want a space where I can produce the books that I want to write.
Without readers want to read.
Yes, and with only referencing what the readers enjoy, as opposed to what a group of people that are quite separate from that or that think the readers might enjoy. So we'll see how it goes. I really want to connect with the right audience for it. So I emphasize marketing that this is a historical romance with elements of fantasy rather than a fantasy novel with a pinch of romance, which sometimes can get lost in a kind of marketing spiel.
Absolutely. And speaking of romantasy, for people who are expecting a romantasy style romance, they might be looking for something quite turbulent, just like the publishing industry, something quite toxic. And yet, the love in this book is quite sweet. I was surprised.
You were surprised. You kept waiting for someone to do something terrible.
I read your other books, Gabby, and I was waiting for something really terrible.
You were waiting for someone to die.
I was waiting for someone to die, or well, I don't know. I was just waiting for the horror. I've read your short stories too, so I was waiting for horror. And instead, there was this quite tender romance. And of course, there are exciting moments, there are heightened moments, there are even quite, you could say, turbulent moments. There's some drama. Yeah, it's quite healthy. So you see conflict, and yet you see it resolved in ways where you kind of always hope the conflict will be resolved like this in romances and books, where you like the characters and they do these crazy things and you're so frustrated. And there's moments of that, and then
they communicate.
They communicate. I was flabbergasted. I was like, what do you mean they're talking about their feelings sensibly? They didn't have therapists back then.
Yes, shocking.
Sorry, what's going on?
I wasn't really thinking about that when I was writing it, because I was writing it from a perspective of, for me, a romance is about how a happy relationship comes to be, right? So it's the journey of two people who meet each other and who have their own issues, and how do they come to this point of a happy romance?
And they have a lot of issues, these
and
two.
you need to have a happily ever after, right, in a romance. And which is such a comforting thing. You pick up a romance book, you know there's going to be a happy ending at the end. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't get exciting. It just means that you are learning about the process of those two people. And for me, if I have a happily ever after, then it has to be a healthy relationship at the end. And you cannot have...
Not Heathcliff and Kathy.
I mean, and it was really interesting, actually, that the first time I realized that this was not the base expectation was when I messaged some bookstagrammers who have agreed to help promote the book, to read and review the book. And they asked me if the trigger warnings on the info sheet, if those were between the main characters. And I don't want to give anything away, but those are fairly, nothing excessive, but it's pretty negative things to do with discrimination, for example. And it shocked me because I felt like, why would you expect there to be like abusive behavior between people who you know are going to end up together forever?
Because it's popular.
But that is such an unhealthy attitude for me, because I want to, when I finish a book like this, I want to feel good. I want to feel like the book has reached a satisfying conclusion. And what I really don't want is to have in the back of my mind, is this female main character now trapped in a terrible relationship that will destroy her emotionally over the next 20-30 years? I just want to know that those two people will be there for each other, will be supportive partners, and that they fit together nicely. So that is something that, it's not a dark romance. I don't like promoting unhealthy relationships also as something romantic. I think that there is plenty of excitement to be found in healthy relationships.
Well, I really hope that I really hope people will feel the same way. Because it's quite normal to read these books and be almost concerned.
Yes.
And you wonder, is it like watching a car crash? Is that what makes people interested in this? Or is it just that, this is familiar and exciting and attractive? And actually,
maybe it's
the streets are trash, let's be real.
It's watching a lot of 90s romantic comedies where the female characters are basically continuously demeaned, possibly even attacked by their main love interest, and somehow we're supposed to feel good about their relationship at the end, and that doesn't sit right with me.
That's what we grew up on then.
Yeah.
Many millennials.
So let's create new tropes. Let's create a new blueprint for what relationships should be like. They should leave us feeling good.
I hope so. This book left me feeling good. I was like, I need to go kiss my husband. This is very sweet. So I think the theme of women supporting women is very important in this book. There's some beautiful friendships. There's just some really lovely moments. And there are points where I worried. There's points where a secondary character appears and you think, what's she going to do to poor Edwina? And then it was nice. And it was such a relief. I can't even explain it. You just kind of get sick of reading about women attacking other women and belittling other women in novels, and it seems to be such a common background trope that we almost don't realise it's there. So what is it that made you decide, I'm going to put in some positive girl power, some women supporting women in healthy ways? Because it's not just the romance that's healthy and beautiful. The friendships are absolutely gorgeous too.
I think for me, I am surrounded by wonderful women. I surround myself with wonderful, intelligent women who have created this extremely supportive community around each other. And that is what I witness all the time. And I think it's worth, as a woman, not just as a reader, as a woman, I think it's really worth asking a question sometimes of in whose interest is it to create this sense of distrust between women, and who benefits from women belittling each other, or whether it's because of age. And this is something that I wanted to emphasize in the book. So there's some older female characters who you might come across and feel a certain way about, and
no spoilers.
No spoilers, but I feel like it's quite important to challenge certain stereotypes we have, because I think that there is a definite societal push towards belittling, especially older women, women who are no longer considered, physically attractive, perhaps, and make them smaller and make them seem ridiculous, and to create this sense of tension between generations. And I think that is not in any woman's best interest to do that. And so, women supporting women is what happens to me in my life. And so I hope that all of my readers get to experience it.
It's so beautiful. And it brings us almost full circle back to our discussion at the start about the domestic workers' rights. And at the time, it was also women's rights. The suffragette movement was quite important. So did you do a lot of research on that for the novel too?
So I studied it a little bit at university when I did my undergraduate degree, and it's something that always caught my eye about the tensions between the convenience of those women who were already who felt like they were in a position, perhaps not of power, but in compliance, but benefited them. And it's something that we see all the time. It's a trope of a very conservative woman who, especially when she's young, she feels like she's protected by the proximity to conservative men. And then, very often finds herself on the other side of it as she gets older, and she loses the main thing that gave her power when she was younger, so her youth, her beauty, and she no longer gets the same treatment. So I felt like that was definitely something that was happening during the movement for women's rights, because you constantly had this tension between women who were out and they were asking for more. And then it wasn't just the men, but it was very loudly a lot of women who were very comfortable and who felt like this perhaps put them in danger in some way. And it went against them and what they stood for, and perhaps felt attacked by it as well. And so they were opposed to it.
It feels like a novel for our times, because we're almost seeing this again with the trad wife movement, if you can call it a movement. The trad wife trend. I hope it's more of a trend. Do you think there are some parallels there?
I mean, for sure. I think there is an element of, trying to keep things calm and convenient in a very uncertain world. People are definitely looking for something to hold on to as values, and if you are never faced with the other side or what the consequences could be for you personally, people find it very difficult to emphasize with those who don't have it as good, perhaps. If you're in a very happy relationship, if you're financially secure, and all the women in your circles are in similar circumstance, it can be difficult to understand the struggle of people who are in a different circumstance. And so I think it's important now, just as was important then, to try and build bridges and start from the points that we have, things we have in common to kind of make our way forward and improve things.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating. Edwina is an imperfect character. You write imperfect characters, but they're likeable. I think one of the things that makes her likeable is that empathy she has, that care she has for other people, because she can almost imagine their situation. She can put herself somewhat into their position. It's quite a beautiful thing. So this novel, we need to read a little excerpt, but before that, I have just a quick question. I think it's quite important. This novel is moving. I felt like I was educated, and yet it was uplifting. So everyone needs a copy of this. Where can they find the book?
You can get it through most major retailers online, actually. So whether you shop at Barnes & Noble or Waterstones, you can order it through their websites. You can, of course, get it on Amazon, but all major retailers should be able to provide you with a copy.
Incredible. And we'll put a link in the description box below. Right, well, without further ado, I would love for you to read a little excerpt.
So this is from a scene where Hare first gets introduced into the wider society, and she's at a ball and she is playing a role. And Anne Bonningham is her partner in crime, whose connections allow Hare to play this part. So Anne plays the role of her aunt. So she is whispering into Hare's ear right now. To your left, that's the second son of Duke of Chichester, the family's poorest church mice, reportedly looking for an American heiress, and whispered urgently in her ear. Make sure to avoid him. We don't want him telling all of his friends at the club about how he rejected you as a candidate because of your lack of dowry. Hare looked in the opposite direction and tilted her head up. Oh, you're right, Aunt. The chandelier is quite lovely, she said out loud. It reminds me of the one at the Carnegie Hall. Do you remember? Don't overdo it, was the reply, though Hare noticed a hint of a smile on the old schoolmistress's face. The woman had a sense of humour, though she was currently as tense as a piano string. Hare wanted so badly to roll her eyes. After all, wasn't this what her aunt had schooled her in so carefully? Hinting at the knowledge she did not possess and feigning interest in everything but the actual object of their visit to London. That one wearing a coloured cravat to your right, the Baroness, excited to be once more on the prowl, albeit in a different role, tapped her fan on Hare's shoulder, owns 3 cotton factories in the north of England, as rich as Cresses, though untitled. She paused, then added, keep him in mind and keep him sweet if nothing better comes up. Hare shivered. 3 cotton factories. She wondered how many mythics had been bound to his service. She'd heard rumours of the working conditions in such places, where the white fibres in the air made the holes look like it was always snowing. The cotton would float between the machines, slowly making its way into the workers' lungs. But they were mythic lungs, so nobody worried too much about it. But Hare knew her duty here, and so she lifted her eyes to the man in question, who, in spite of the early hour, was already watching her with eyes hazed by liquor. He inherited his factories from his father, and they're run entirely by his mother and younger brother, the Baroness added. Dear Lady Winchfield, would you introduce me to your companions? Hare glanced back and widened her eyes ever so slightly, as if surprised to see a man standing there, pretending not to see the increasingly disorderly queue of the men behind him, all hoping to make the same request. Of course, Mr. Sterling, this is my old friend, Miss Anne Bonningham. The man gave Miss Bonningham a smile, friendly enough so they could all pretend he cared 2 figs about her. And her niece, Miss Edwina Walker, who came to visit us all the way from America. America, eh? The man smoothed his moustache with the back of his hand. I haven't been myself, of course, but I've heard interesting things. He raised his eyebrows, and just in case Hare could miss his meaning, added, Such lively and charming women it seems to birth, that I'm in half a mind to sail over there tomorrow, except... He reached for her thankfully gloved hand and lifted it to his lips. Except so many of you seem to be coming over here instead. And seeing you, I said to myself, Joseph Sterling, you won't forgive yourself if you miss the opportunity to make this charming creature's acquaintance. And so here I am at your service. You're too kind. Hare forced herself to smile. Thankfully, the man was only a mister and so unlikely to be seen as a first-round prospect for her. The small mercies. The man's moustache had left a damp spot on her gloves when he kissed her, and it took a great deal of self-control to not wipe her hand on her voluminous skirts. In any case, her hand was already picked up by another man, who'd conveniently elbowed Mr. Sterling out of the way. This one seemed less repulsive, but Hare was under strict instruction to not show any particular interest until signalled to by Miss Bonningham. He introduced himself in an accent so heavy she couldn't quite make it out. The man must have been wealthy, for Lady Winchfield gave Hare a little wink before she pressed her fingers into the younger woman's arm. Good grief, if they were to make her marry the man, what would their life even look like? She supposed she'd eventually end up being more able to understand him, though that seemed a risky strategy for picking out a life mate. And this, dear Miss Walker, is Duke of Brandon, Lady Winchfield nodded to Miss Bonningham in satisfaction, and Hare felt both her arms squeezed in unison by the two women, as they boldly turned her around. She took a deep breath and looked towards a man standing to the left of Lady Winchfield. Her heart sank. Standing before her was the very man she'd abused for the crime of helping her and the bird mythic who'd saved her earlier. His face was curiously blank, and she allowed herself to hope he didn't recognize her. Remembering where she was, Hare beamed her brightest smile at him and held out her hand. "How do you do?" The man raised one eyebrow at her, and his lips twisted in a strange expression, even as he took her hand. "How do you do? Pleased to make your acquaintance." He squeezed her fingertips and leaned down. "Again." The last word was whispered, meant for Hare's ears alone, so she could feel the red creeping up her cheeks. "Oh, for goodness sake, Ernest, are you really going to misrepresent yourself?" Lady Winchfield smacked the man on the shoulder with an air of exasperation. Another one pushed in front. He gave a curt bow. "I'm Duke of Brandon, Miss Edwina. This sad impostor," he nodded towards the clearly amused man still holding onto Hare's hand, "is my friend, Mr. Thompson." "Mr. Thompson?" Hare repeated the words, inexplicably disappointed. The man nodded. "I'm afraid so." He flashed a smile at her. "I hope you will forgive me for not putting things right immediately. A lonely solicitor seldom gets the treatment a duke does. I merely wanted to soak in the experience."
So lovely hearing it read. I'm waiting for the audiobook read by you, of course.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing so much of the research, the history, the thinking behind the book, and the industry tea. Hopefully more on that later in future. And once again, people can get the book from Barnes & Nobles, Waterstones,
Yes.
Amazon, everywhere,
Yes.
basically. And where is the best place? Your website to find the information? Or the links in the description?
I update my Instagram profile the most, so
Okay.
that's Gabriela Houston 1.
Mm-hmm.
I do post on my website, but not every detail of the journey. So, but if you are interested in getting updates, then you can sign up for my newsletter at gabrielahouston.com.
It's great.
And that's where I update people about any events or new books or giveaways.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you so much.
And get a copy of Binding the Cuckoo. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.